Chaos fans, Robin here. Today I'm going to be talking through some deeper deck building strategies, which hopefully you'll find useful, or you may think I'm a raving idiot, but anyway, hopefully you'll be entertained. Pete is probably fed up with me talking about making this video because I'm always banging on about it. I'm fascinated in this game by what I call the third end phase objective cards. So these are the ones that can only be scored in the third end phase. There are 11 objective cards which can be scored in the third end phase and only in the third end phase. And the 5 of them are general cards that can be used by any of the warbands. There's 1 for the Auric Warband, 1 for the Stormcast Eternal Warband, 1 for the Reavers, and 3 for the Sepulchral Guard. The thing with the third end phase objective cards is, of course, that you only want them to come out in the third end phase. So although they tend to be big and heavy hitting, for example, all of them really are, apart from a couple of the Sepulchral Guard ones, all of them are 3 glory or more. Well, most of them are 3 glory. There's one of the general ones is 2, and the Corn's Champion is 6. Yeah, there's a lot of glory to be had there, and there is a temptation to stuff your deck filled with them. I did hear somebody say they put 5 in their deck, but you do need to bear in mind that the maths of it. You've only got 12 cards. If you put 5 of them, it's going to skew your deck because you do want to score other things as well. So, have a quick look at the odds. You can do this if you look online. It's called something called a hypergeometric progression. And I've had a great explanation for it and a little calculator, which I'll put as a link in the video text below. But basically, if in your 12 cards you have 1 of these cards that we're talking about, these in third end phase cards, if you've got 1 of them in your deck, so your 12 cards, and you draw it out, there is a 25% chance that it'll come out in the first 3 cards, because there's 3 cards and there's 12. You're drawing 3 of 12, that's a quarter of them. So there's a 25% chance that it'll come out. If you have 2, it rises to 0.4. And so if you have, 1 is you've got a quarter, 25% chance, and you've got a 40% chance if you have 2 of 1 of them coming out in your first 3 cards. Now there's a 0.54 chance that you won't get one at all. So more than 50% of the time you won't get one. You may notice, those amongst you, that doesn't quite add up to 1, and the reason for that is there's also the small possibility you may end up with 2, and that's not counted for in this the way I've done this hypergeometric progression maths. So bear in mind, when I say 1, there is always the opportunity that you might get more out as well, which is reflected in the next in the next statistic. If you have 3 third end phase cards in your deck, then there's just below, a little bit below 0.5, and just below, a little bit below a 50% chance that they will, 1 of them will come out. And there's a 0.38 chance, so you're nearly down to only a third of the time you won't get one. There's a 0.12 chance, 12% chance that you'll get more than 1. And that will be, not great. So there's a small chance that you actually will get 2 cards. Bearing in mind the 2/3 rule, which is you want to score 2/3 of your objectives in the first turn, then you would have to throw that hand away if you did get more than 1. Or and depending on what the other ones were, you might have to throw it away anyway. Now that might be okay if you've stuffed it full. If you've got 5 or 6 in there, then okay, you say, well, I can throw those away. I've still got 3 left. That is true, but I assume your deck's built to a game plan, and it will be hard to plan to all of these cards. I think. Maybe I'm wrong. You have to tell me what you think. I think you want to be able to try and get out the cards that you want and not stuff it full of extra cards, but maybe I'm wrong there. Let me know. If you do put 4 in, you'll then have a slightly over 50% chance of getting 1, but only a 25% chance that you won't get 1 at all, and then nearly a 25% chance that you'll get 2. So a quarter of the time you'll get 2 or more in your hand, which I don't think is desirable. You go up to 5 and 6, it raises even more to nearly a 50% chance of getting 1, not quite, 0.47 chance. With a third of the time you'll get more than 1, and then if you go to 6 cards, you'll get only 1 40% of the time, and you'll get more than 1 50% of the time. So 6 will be certainly pushing it if you went that route. Now, following on from that, just to quickly say that if you then didn't get any at all, then obviously in your second turn, assuming you haven't got any immediately cards, second turn round, so you managed to score all of your objectives. The next 3 you drew, if you drew 3, it would be, if you had one objective in there, one end phase objective, there'd be a 33% chance of it coming out. So you'd have 9 cards left, there'd be a 33% chance of it coming out second time. And if you had 2 cards in there, there'd be a 50% chance of one coming out, with a very small chance of 2 coming out. And if you had 3 cards in, you'd be up to a 50% chance, 53% chance of one of them coming out, and up to a 22% chance of 2 coming out. So the odds become obviously more in your favour, and as if you still haven't got one, by the end of it, there's a 50% chance by the last 6, assuming you've scored all your cards again, the last 3 you drew, there'd be a 50% chance of coming out. Now I know you can skew those odds, you may not score all your objectives, so the odds will change as you go through the game, or you may have some score immediately cards, which means you cycle through your deck quicker, and obviously that's always good practice to try and score those score immediately cards to get through your deck, to score as much glory as possible. So that's a bit of the maths. I hope that makes sense. Like I say, it's quite a hypergeometric progression. It's quite interesting. I might try and apply it to some other bits and pieces as we go on to other videos if this one is popular. But let's look at the cards themselves. Starting with, well, I'll start with 2. We'll start with Ard as Iron on the side of the Orcs, and the Eternals on the Stormcast Eternals. They're basically the same card, but for a different warband. The text is, score this in the 3rd end phase if none of your fighters are out of action. So basically, you've got to get all of your guys through to survive till the end. I probably wouldn't include either of these cards, although I have had a situation where I think I could have scored either of them, but didn't because I didn't have them in my deck. So Ard as Iron and Eternals are essentially the same card for each warband, for the Orc warband and for the Eternals warband. Which one is easier to score? I'm not quite sure. I have to say I don't really like them at all, these cards. They are tough wins. I guess if you're playing a very defensive deck, then obviously you've got to have them in. I just feel that playing both these armies, both these warbands, you're likely to get into a fight. And I know there's a very good defensive Eternals deck out there that does use this, and it's a great card if you can score it. I do feel in some ways the Orcs are easier to defend this against. They've got 17 wounds, although admittedly 5 of those are on Gerzag, which means the other 3 have 12 between them. Like the Eternals, they have 12. I just feel with the Orcs, your opponent's forces are split a little bit. They're less able to gang up. I think it's actually easier to defend against with the Orcs than the Eternals. I think the Eternals are more likely to lose a man than the Orcs are. Perhaps you disagree. That's just as a gut feeling. I haven't played either of those much, but I'm not a big fan of them. I'm not a big fan of playing completely defensively, especially as you're not going to pick up many objectives in this game with these 2 warbands. So that's those 2. I would use Ard as Iron more than I would use Eternals. The Sepulchral Guard ones I haven't used very much. Now these are funny cards. There's one of them is worth 3, Peerless General, and the other 2 are only worth 1 each. The Invigorated Dead and Fearless in Death. Now I kind of feel that actually I wouldn't use either of those. The ones that are only worth 1 glory. Score this in the 3rd end phase if all your surviving fighters, at least 3, are inspired. Score in this end phase if only 1 friendly fighter on the battlefield. I certainly wouldn't use that one. The chances of orchestrating it to you have 6, I think are slim. I would never use Fearless in Death. The Invigorated Dead I might use more. You've got a fairly good chance of inspiring your surviving fighters in this game. You can bring them back. But for 1 glory, there might be other things that are better to have in your deck in there. Peerless General, score this in the 3rd end phase if you have 4 or more surviving fighters and none are inspired. Again, I'm not sure that it's a great option. It means you've got to bring nobody back. So I haven't played the Sepulchral Guard at all, so perhaps I probably shouldn't really comment on this card. I feel that is, I think there are probably better general options in the deck if you're going to include. Bear in mind you only want to include 2 or 3 of these cards. I probably wouldn't include that one. So then leaving us, so I've kind of poo-pooed all the specialist ones there. Perhaps unfairly. Do let me know if you think that's unfair. So looking at these 3rd these general third end phase objectives, there are definitely some synergies to be had here. For a start, you've got denial and contained. Now, denial is scoring this third end phase if there are no enemy fighters in your territory. You can certainly try and manipulate that to score, and then contained is score in the third end phase. All surviving enemy fighters are in their territory. They're kind of the same thing. No enemy fighters in your territory, all surviving enemy fighters in their territory. You've got that one thin strip between the territories, which would mean you could score denial but not contained. But actually, they're largely the same thing. I've used this to good effect in the video against with the Iron Skulls against the Reavers, and it really worked. And it's a really good one to have a game plan to. It is an obvious one, and people do know it, so people will be looking to, even at the end of the game, just break out and get into your zone. So you have to be aware of that. But it is definitely worth thinking about as your two. If you're only going to have two, that's a possible way to go. There's also Conquest, which sort of goes with it and sort of doesn't. Score this in the third end phase of all your surviving fighters in your opponent's territory. I think it's easier to manipulate that without trying to manipulate denial and contained. The good thing about Conquest is if you've only got one surviving hero, you can get him in the opponent's territory and still score it. It's not one of these ones, but look, a lot of the more general ones have a number of fighters that have to be affected by it, and this is, you literally do it with one. So that is quite good. It does only score 2, so it is one of the easier ones to score. In the Slaughter, score this in the third end phase if 5 or more enemy fighters are out of action. You can only score this against Sepulchral Guard, or if you've killed all of the Reavers. To me, it doesn't seem worth having it in. I saw somebody say this is only for multiple games, but actually you've got extra 3 and 7 if you've got a 3-player game, and 9 for a 4-player game. So I'm not entirely sure how easy that is to score anyway. So I would never use Endless Slaughter in a game. It's just not worth it. It's nowhere near as easy to score as Contained, Denial, or Conquest. Superior Tactician. Now I have a sort of love-hate relationship with Superior Tactician. I really like it as a card, but it's really hard to score. Score this in the third end phase if you have scored 6 or more other objective cards. Now, if you had no score immediately cards in your hand, that means you'd have to have scored at least 2 in every round, and then 2 in the last round, and then have this one left. Now, so you can, that's a tall order. I think it's easier to score if you've got take objective type cards rather than sort of more tactical ones, funnily enough. It feels like you ought to be able to have it, when you're trying to outmaneuver your opponent. Actually, I think if you're running about and gaining objectives, it's quite easy. If you get 3 or 4 objectives, you're sort of 2/3 of the way to halfway, or 2/3 of the way to scoring this card. You really have to think carefully if it comes out in the first turn whether to get rid of it or not, because you score this in the third as you score 6 or more other objective cards. If this comes out in your first turn, you can only score 2 that turn, which means you've got to score 4 others in the last 2 turns, and how easy is that going to be? So I think you almost have to think about getting rid of it if it comes out in the first turn. I quite like it as a card. I want to include it because I think it invites more interesting gameplay, and it does have some synergies with it. You can play it with Flora Strategy. In fact, if you have Superior Tactician, you almost have to have Flora Strategy in there. Score this in the end phase if you score 2 or more other objective cards in this phase. Now that's tough. Again, you need some score immediately cards in there in your deck, but if you can score 2, if you pull this one out in the first round and you score the other 2, you get that one for free. So that's 3 done, and you're halfway to Superior Tactician. So I think you have to have it in there. You're obviously going to be trying to concentrate on scoring objectives if you've got Superior Tactician in your deck, and I think you need to have that in there to help you on your way. The drawback with this card, this combination over Contained and Denial, is that if Superior Tactician doesn't come out, then it's only floor strategy only gives you one, whereas it contains a denial of 3 each. If only one of them comes out, you could still score 3 glory, which is pretty good. If superior tactician doesn't come out, then you floor strategy only give you one. But obviously, floor strategy can be scored in any phase, so that maybe that's better. The other synergies I've noticed, and I haven't particularly played these out, is seize ground. Score this in an end phase if you hold an objective in enemy territory. If you're playing conquest, score this in the third end phase if all your surviving fighters are in your opponent's territory. You're going to be trying to get into your territory. You may as well play seize ground and try and jump on an objective while you're in there. It's got to be worth it. And also to go with conquest is swift advance. Score this in an end phase if all your surviving fighters are in enemy territory. So while you're on your way to conquest, you will be trying to swift advance, and it may be at the end of the game you can have score this in the third end phase if all of them are, and swift advance as well. Doesn't quite make sense. That's worth 3. If you were lucky to have seize ground, that would be 4. Those 3, okay, they came out in the last turn. This wouldn't work, but if you 2 of them came out and you had superior tactician, they'd actually work pretty well together. That's quite a potent combination. Putting conquest, swift advance, superior tactician, seize ground, and flawless strategy in your deck, and make your army about your warband about getting into your opponent's territory and staying there. That's pretty potent. Pretty potent if you can do it. And one final synergy that goes with that is divide and conquer. Score this in an end phase of each player has at least one fighter in their own territory and at least one fighter in enemy territory. It's worth sticking in. People who are hunting objectives will come into your territory if you're pushing forward to do conquest and say a swift advance or seize ground. It's worth having in your deck. So that's a good little synergy there. That's quite a lot of points. That's kind of moved away a little bit from the third end phase cards. So that's most of my thoughts. Now, some of you will notice I haven't talked about one of the big cards yet, and that is Khorne's Champion. And this Khorne's Champion is Khorne only, funnily enough. And there's also 2 other cards I'd like to talk about. They're not strictly third end phase cards, but I think they are most likely to be scored in the third end phase, and therefore I call them the honorary third end phase cards. That's Annihilation and Claim the City. So Annihilation is a general card, and Claim the City is a Sepulchral Guard only card. Do you want these in your deck? Well, there's a question. I don't really like either of them, to be honest, to be in my deck. I mean, great cards to claim, particularly Claim the City, but it's really hard to claim. Score this in an end phase if you hold every objective. Possible, made easier if your opponent has pillage or something like that. But you really only like to score these in the end phase. So you kind of, when you're considering what to put in your deck, I would count these 2 cards as third end phase cards because you're unlikely to score them before that. So bear that in mind when doing the maths of how many cards you've got. Annihilation, I'm not sure I like. It comes down to how you design your decks. If you design your deck for a tournament, I'm not sure how often you're going to score Annihilation. I kind of feel like scoring Annihilation only happens if your opponent doesn't play that well. That enables you to beat them up into a pulp. Now, it may be that you're particularly brilliant at tactics, and it doesn't matter how well that your opponent plays, you kill them anyway. I'm not sure whether that's the case. I feel like if you make mistakes or your opponent's unlucky, if they make mistakes or your opponent's unlucky, then you may score Annihilation. I think it's only really good if you're going to a specific deck. It's great against Reavers. Totting up the wounds in these, you've got 17 wounds for the Oryx, 12 for the Stormcast, 14 for the Reavers, and 19 for the Sepulchral Guard. So you've got all those wound totals, and then for like 17 and 19 for the Sepulchral Guard and the Oryx. For the Sepulchral Guard, they can bring people back, so their wounds might be even more than that. And you've got things like Healing Potion and Great Fortitude, which are in nearly every deck, and that's going to bump that wound total up even more for those cards. You're very unlikely to score Annihilation against those. The Stormcast, they're only 12. It feels like Annihilation should be possible. And if you get lucky, it might be, because what's with Stormcast, if they fail a save, it's like a double whammy. Fail a save for a Stormcast, you take the damage and you don't become inspired. But as soon as they become inspired, then they're rolling off 2 shields, and then they're pretty hard to remove. It's quite hard to kill all 3 Stormcasts, even though it's only a total of 12 wounds. I did a quick rough and ready maths thing, looking at you've got 12 activations in the game, and however many models you've got to kill. And I assumed that you had to sort of do one move and attack for one move to kill each Orc. Not each Orc. One move to kill each person within the warband. So it's not necessarily accurate, because obviously you can kill multiple people in one turn, or you don't have to do an activation to do it. But it rough and ready means, so for Orcs there's 4 of them, so there's 12 activations together. So you've 4 movements and give you 8 attacks to try and kill them in, and that's 2 wounds, more than 2 wounds per attack you have to do. The Sepulchral Guard, it's 1.3, because they have there's only 3 of them, which gives you 9 rounds to do 12 damage. It's 1.33 wounds per round. But they have that extra save shield dice if they pass. So I'm reluctant to say that that's easy, even though it's only 1.3. Reavers is 14 wounds. So Reavers is 2 wounds per round. You've got 7 of them. You've got 7 rounds to kill 5 of them, and they've got 14 wounds between them. But they only have 14. They've got quite a low wound count. They move quick to get out of the way. They've got quite a low wound count, and I think they're the easiest to do it on, to be honest. Because they only have dodge as well, their defense doesn't get any greater. And the Sepulchral Guard, I think you forget it. Forget Annihilation against the Sepulchral Guard. I guess people have probably done it out there, but obviously I'm talking about the balance of probabilities. With 7 of them, with 7 of them to kill, you've got roughly 5 rounds, assuming you're moving to somebody each turn, which I'm not sure is possible with the Sepulchral Guard. But you've got 5 rounds to kill them, so that's tough. That's really tough, and that is even without them coming back. So I would say Annihilation. If you know you're playing Reavers, stick it in. Otherwise, I'll be inclined to leave it out. Claim City I've never played with. It just feels like it's a hard card. Whether you want to play for it or not, it depends on how you set up your deck. But both of those cards, if you do have them in, do bear in mind to count them as third end phase objective cards, because that's when you're likely to score them. So they need to be balanced if you're balancing your deck. Which leads me to Khorne's Champion, the highest scoring card of the game as it exists at the moment. I would never ever include this in my Khorne deck. I don't think Khorne is particularly great at killing things. It's much harder to score than Annihilation. Has to be scored in the last game, although Annihilation is likely to be scored in the last game, and you have to have one of your fighters left at the end. I mean, it's a brilliant gamble if you want to play it, but I think it's a waste of a card. You know, you can only score it right at the end of the game. The conditions for scoring it are atrocious. I wouldn't put it in. Maybe you would. Maybe you've had good luck, good success with it. Let me know. So there you go, that was my video on the third end phase activation cards. I've thought about them a lot. I'm not necessarily sure what my thoughts on that go here, but hopefully that was useful to you. If you have any other thoughts on them, do let me know. If you think I'm rubbish or my theories are rubbish, then do let me know that too. I hope it was useful. I think it boiled down to keep some general ones in your deck and ignore the faction specific ones. You're pretty much playing I think either playing a contained denial game or a superior strategy conquest game. Well, I hope so. I hope that was useful. I hope you enjoyed that. It was fun to make, and I've had good fun thinking about the maths behind it. So, like I say, I hope it was useful. If you'd like to see more of those types of video, I'm sure I could ramble on for a bit longer about something else. So do let us know in the comments below. And until next time, thank you very much for listening and watching, and thanks to Pete for editing my ramble into something coherent. Until next time, goodbye.